How could you do this to me, John?" The words shook out of Melissa Harper's mouth, thick with disbelief. She stood in the doorway of their living room, 6 months pregnant, her hands trembling against the frame. John didn't flinch, arms crossed, face blank, like he was the one being wronged. Her friend Karen had seen him leaving a hotel with Julia, her best friend. Melissa waited for him to deny it with conviction, to call Karen mistaken. But instead, his voice was flat, dismissive. "You're being dramatic, Melissa. Karen's nuts." Then came the blow that knocked the air from her chest. "I'm not attracted to you anymore. You've let yourself go." His words sliced through her like ice. In that moment, tiny, alive, and innocent, Melissa placed a hand on her belly and felt something shift. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war. And she wasn't backing down. Melissa Harper was 32 years old, a quiet, artistic woman who built a life she thought would be safe and lasting. She worked as a freelance illustrator, spending her days creating children's book characters from the cozy corner of their suburban home. She wasn't loud or confrontational. She was kind. She believed in love, in family, in growing something meaningful together. When she married John, it felt like a fairy tale. He was charming, dependable, and said all the right things. They moved into a modest 2-story house with creaky floors and a garden Melissa filled with lavender and daisies. It was their little world, their future. Her best friend Julia had been like a sister since college. They shared everything: coffee shop confessions, breakups, weddings. Julia had been her maid of honor. She held Melissa's hand during early pregnancy scares and laughed with her through cravings and hormonal meltdowns. When Melissa found out she was pregnant, it was Julia she called first, even before her own mother. That's how close they were. Pregnancy, though, was harder than Melissa expected. She battled nausea, back pain, and emotional swings that sometimes left her curled in bed for hours. John seemed distant from the start. He still came to doctor appointments and smiled for the occasional photo, but at home, his warmth had faded. He'd spend more time at the office, come home late, or scroll through his phone with a faraway look in his eyes. When she brought up his coldness, he chalked it up to stress, deadlines, and sleep deprivation. Melissa believed him. She wanted to. She told herself it was just a phase, that men struggled to connect with pregnancy sometimes. She read articles, joined support groups, and tried not to cry when he turned away in bed. She kept cooking dinner, folding baby clothes, and sketching animals for the nursery mural. She wanted this family to work. She thought if she was patient enough, things would get better. But behind the picture-perfect walls of their home, Melissa was slowly breaking. She began second-guessing herself. Was she being too emotional? Too needy? Maybe John was right to pull away. Maybe she really had let herself go. She noticed he didn't look at her the way he used to. Didn't touch her unless necessary. Didn't ask how her day had been. Still, she didn't want to believe he'd stopped loving her. Julia still came around, still smiled and offered support. But even those visits started to feel strange. Melissa couldn't explain it at first. There was something off in Julia's energy, her eyes darting too quickly, her hugs a little too sweet. Melissa chalked it up to nerves or work stress. She didn't want to seem paranoid. She had already felt crazy enough crying in the bathroom over nothing. So she pushed it down, tried to keep things normal. She didn't realize how fragile her reality was until it finally collapsed. When Karen told her what she saw, that Julia and John had been leaving a hotel together, that they kissed in the hallway, something inside Melissa cracked. It wasn't just betrayal, it was exposure. The truth pulled the mask off everything. Her doubts weren't imagined. Her pain wasn't hormonal. Her instincts had been screaming, but she'd silenced them for the sake of peace, the sake of love. Now, standing 6 months pregnant with her world in pieces, Melissa finally saw what she hadn't allowed herself to see before. She had been holding up a broken life with bare hands, bleeding the whole time. And it was over. It didn't happen all at once. John's emotional withdrawal began with subtle shifts that Melissa almost didn't notice. A missed good morning text here, an extra hour at work there. At first, she chalked it up to the pregnancy stress affecting both of them. He was probably just overwhelmed. That's what she told herself. He didn't smile as much. He stopped holding her hand while watching TV. He used to press his palm against her belly every night, whispering to their baby girl. But now he barely looked up from his phone when she spoke. The change was quiet, slow, and devastating. At the same time, Julia started pulling away too. They used to meet for lunch at least once a week, chatting for hours about everything and nothing, but now Julia canceled last minute, or didn't respond at all. When they were together, her eyes darted away, her phone always face down. Melissa still confided in her, pouring out her worries about John, about the pregnancy, about feeling unseen. She had no idea she was talking to the very person who was helping to dismantle her life behind the scenes. Julia nodded and offered support, but it was hollow, rehearsed. Something about her presence stopped feeling safe. The gaslighting came next. John started criticizing things he'd never cared about before. He told Melissa she was too emotional, too negative, too acclimating. He said her voice gave him a headache. He winced when she cried and rolled his eyes when she asked for affection. And slowly, he convinced her she was the problem. Every disagreement ended with her apologizing, even when she wasn't sure what for. She began to monitor her tone, second-guess her feelings, even question her memories. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was too sensitive. Maybe pregnancy was turning her into someone hard to love. She tried everything to make it better. New recipes, new clothes, romantic gestures. But nothing touched him. He remained cold, impatient, uninterested. Their once warm and playful relationship now felt clinical, like a contract they were both waiting to expire. Melissa clung to the hope that things would improve after the baby came. That even that hope was losing oxygen. Her therapist gently suggested she let go of stress, focus on her health, find joy in small things. Melissa tried. But John had already let go. Of her, of their marriage, of the vows he once said with pride. He didn't check in on her anymore. He didn't notice when she cried in the shower, or when she spent nights curled up on the couch instead of in bed. He simply moved on. What Melissa didn't realize yet was that while her heart was breaking, her strength was forming beneath it. Every moment she survived, every cruel word she endured, was forging something deeper. She thought she was just holding on, but in truth, she was preparing to rise. The night Melissa confronted John was supposed to bring clarity, but it unraveled her world instead. She stood there, 6 months pregnant, trying to hold herself together as she asked him to just tell the truth. And he did, cruelly, without remorse. He said he was in love with Julia, that it had been going on for months, and he didn't regret it. Then, with venom in his voice, he told her she was pathetic, that her neediness, her complaints, her swollen body, it all repulsed him. He sneered that she had let herself go, and that she was nothing like the woman he married. His words sliced through her like glass. Melissa said nothing as he threw his final insults. He mocked her for crying, said she was making it more dramatic than it needed to be. But in that silence, something inside her shifted. Her hands rested protectively on her belly as Emma moved. She looked at John and realized this wasn't a man she needed to stay, and this wasn't a home she needed to stay in. The next morning, she quietly packed 2 suitcases. She didn't leave a note. She didn't look back. Her mom had offered her a place to stay weeks ago, sensing something wasn't right, and now Melissa finally accepted. When she arrived at the familiar front porch, her mother opened the door before she could knock. She didn't say anything at first. She just opened her arms and held her daughter close. Melissa broke. The sobs came out in jagged bursts as she collapsed into her mother's arms. It was the first time she had allowed herself to cry, really cry, not in secret, not into a pillow, but out loud, with someone there to hold her. "You and Emma are going to be okay," her mother whispered, over and over again. And somehow, Melissa believed her. The days that followed were quiet but steady. Her mother helped her set up a small nursery in the guest room, washed the tiny onesies, cooked her favorite meals. Melissa was still grieving, still angry, still shocked by the betrayal, but she could breathe. No more walking on eggshells, no more pretending things were okay, no more bracing herself for cruel remarks. It was over. Even though it hurt, there was relief in that. Melissa began to talk to Emma more, out loud, as if her baby girl could hear every word. She told her about the life they were going to build together, about the strength they would share. She sang lullabies while folding little socks, and found peace in imagining a future that wasn't broken, just different. That first week, she deleted every photo of John from her phone. She changed her number. She blocked him and Julia from her social media. She was done clinging to the wreckage. Now, every decision she made was for Emma. Every breath was for the baby growing inside her. Melissa wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to heal. Karen's visit changed everything. Melissa was about 7 months pregnant when her old friend showed up at her mother's doorstep, nervously twisting the strap of her purse. "Melissa, I need to talk to you," she said, eyes filled with guilt. Melissa invited her in, heart already pounding. Something about Karen's face made it clear. They sat on the couch, the nursery monitor humming softly in the background. Karen took a deep breath and said the words Melissa had always feared, but never truly accepted. "I saw John and Julia at a hotel. They kissed. They came out of the same room." Melissa felt her chest tighten. She had suspected for months, but part of her had clung to hope that it wasn't real, that it was stress, that maybe she had misunderstood something. But hearing it laid out so plainly, so factually, left no room for denial. Karen explained everything, how she had run into them by accident, how they had chosen to herself out of shock. But now, with Emma due soon, she couldn't stay silent. Melissa thanked her, calm on the outside but unraveling inside. That night, she sat in bed with her hand over her stomach, feeling Emma move. Her mind swirled with questions she'd never get answered. How long had they been sneaking around? Did Julia ever feel guilty? Did John ever stop to think about the damage he was causing? But mostly, she felt numb. The betrayal didn't hurt in the same way anymore. It just felt heavy, like a chapter she was finally ready to close. Months passed. Emma was born, and Melissa's world became a blur of late-night feedings, diaper changes, and sweet, sleepy smiles. She had no contact with John, not a call, not a message. It was as if he had vanished. And honestly, that made things easier. Then one afternoon, Melissa went to the mall alone while her mom watched Emma. She was browsing baby clothes when a voice stopped her in her tracks. "Melissa." She turned and saw Julia, pregnant, pale, eyes swollen from crying. She rushed over, tears already spilling, and grabbed Melissa's arm. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "John left me. He said he couldn't handle it. He's drinking, gambling. He's not who I thought he was." She clapped Melissa. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to forgive me." Melissa stood, frozen, heart pounding. This was the moment she'd imagined 100 times. Julia, broken, begging. But all Melissa felt was clarity. No rage, no satisfaction, no pity. Just an understanding that forgiveness wasn't something she owed. Without a word, she turned and walked away. And if that wasn't enough, John was waiting on her front steps when she got home. Slouched, reeking of alcohol, eyes bloodshot. He stood as she approached. "Melissa," he mumbled, "I need to see you. I love Emma. Please let me come back. I fix it." Melissa didn't flinch. "You're sorry?" she asked, her voice steady. "You abandoned me when I was 6 months pregnant. You missed your daughter's birth. You disappeared. And now that everything's gone, you show up like none of it happened." He stammered, tears in his eyes. "I've changed. I can be a father. Just give me a chance." She looked him in the eyes. "This isn't regret, John. This is consequence. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." Then she stepped past him, unlocked the door, and walked inside, leaving the man who'd destroyed their family out in the dark. Melissa didn't slam doors, scream into phones, or plot elaborate payback. That wasn't her way. Her form of revenge came softly, quietly, and completely. After closing the door on John that night, she didn't look back. Instead, she turned all her energy inward, to healing, to rebuilding, to Emma. Not out of bitterness, but because she finally understood. The best revenge wasn't showing John what he lost. It was knowing she and Emma had everything they needed without him. The very next morning, she opened her laptop and began searching for jobs she could do from home. Between feedings and nap schedules, she submitted applications to school districts and art programs. Her degree in visual arts and years of freelance imposition were more than enough. 2 weeks later, she was offered a remote part-time position with a nonprofit arts initiative that taught drawing to underprivileged kids across the country. The pay wasn't much, but it was something. And more than that, it was hers. In her downtime, what little of it she had, Melissa pulled out her old sketch pad. She hadn't drawn for herself in months. With Emma napping beside her, she poured her heartbreak into ink and watercolor. Her first piece was a mother holding a baby in a storm, her hair wild, her eyes steady. The second was a woman standing on a cliff's edge, not afraid of the fall, but of never jumping. It was raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal. She uploaded a few of them to a handmade print site on a whim. Within days, someone bought one. That first sale felt like lightning in her chest. Not because of the money, but because someone saw her pain and said, "I see you." It gave her the courage to keep going. Each night she'd create. Each morning, she'd package and ship a few prints. Over time, her Etsy shop took shape. She called it Brushed Back, a nod to the way she was pushed down, only to rise stronger. She also joined a local mothers group, not just to meet others, but to share space with women who understood what it felt like to start over. Every Tuesday, Melissa would load Emma into the stroller and attend the circle. Some weeks they cried, some weeks they laughed, but always they listened. One woman shared how her ex had drained their bank account, another, how she'd fled in the middle of the night with her toddler. Each story reminded Melissa that she wasn't alone. Therapy helped too. Not just for processing the betrayal, but for shedding the guilt. Her therapist reminded her over and over, John's actions were not her fault. His cruelty, his abandonment, his affair, none of it was about her shortcomings. That truth didn't come easily, but each session carved away a little more of the shame until Melissa could finally breathe, without second-guessing her worth. And with every passing week, she let go of John and Julia more. She deleted their photos from her phone, removed their wedding picture from the nursery wall, and boxed up any remnants of the life she had once tried so desperately to protect. The rocking chair John built, gone. The baby blanket Julia gifted her, donated. She wanted Emma to grow up surrounded by warmth, not reminders of betrayal. Meanwhile, the chaos that had once threatened to consume Melissa was quietly swallowing John and Julia. Word got around that John lost his job after multiple complaints of erratic behavior and unprofessionalism. Julia, now pregnant and alone, had moved back in with her parents. Their picture-perfect fantasy had collapsed, not with a bang, but with the slow erosion of reality. And Melissa? She hadn't lifted a single finger to make it happen. They destroyed themselves. She never gloated, never reached out, never posted a single vague quote about karma. She simply lived. She walked Emma to the park. She painted new pieces. She replied to Etsy customers with warmth and gratitude. She built a peaceful, creative life, one quiet step at a time. People noticed. Old friends reached out, commenting on how strong she seemed, how she glowed differently. But the truth was simpler. Melissa had been broken, but not ruined. She had stitched herself back together with thread made of grace and grit, and when she passed John on the street one day, months later, unkempt, alone, eyes darting away, she didn't feel rage or sadness. She felt nothing. Her silence was louder than any revenge could ever be. Emma's birth was nothing like Melissa had imagined, but it was everything she needed. There was no doting husband at her bedside, no partner holding her hand through contractions, but there was calm, there was grace, there was love. Her mother stood beside her, whispering encouragement and brushing damp hair from her forehead. Nurses moved quietly around her, their voices soft, their presence reassuring. And when Emma finally arrived, tiny, pink, wailing, and beautiful, Melissa held her close and knew without question she wasn't alone. She never had been, She was enough. In the days that followed, Melissa allowed herself to rest. She didn't rush to prove anything. She rocked Emma gently through the night, sang to her softly during feedings, and let the love between them grow naturally, deeply. She no longer felt the ache of John's absence. What once felt like a gaping wound was now a scar, a reminder of what she'd survived, not what she'd lost. By the time Emma was 3 months old, Melissa's Etsy shop had gained momentum. Orders trickled in, reviews piled up, and she began getting requests for custom pieces. Her artwork pieces born from pain and resilience spoke to other women. Messages arrived daily. Your story is my story. Your prints made me feel seen. She began adding handwritten thank you notes in every package, signing them with her newly reclaimed name, Melissa Harper. She hadn't used it in years. But one day, standing in line at the DMV with Emma in a sling, she filled out the paperwork and smiled. Harper. Her name. Her story. Her strength. No more tethering herself to a man who walked away from everything. Melissa was writing her own legacy now. With a modest but steady income and her mother's help, Melissa was able to rent a small apartment just 10 minutes from her mom's house. It wasn't fancy, just 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and hand-me-down furniture. But it was hers. She painted the nursery walls a soft lavender and covered them in framed prints from her own shop. It felt like home, not just a space she existed in. As Emma grew, so did Melissa's sense of purpose. She began volunteering at a local community center, offering art classes to young moms who felt overwhelmed and forgotten. It wasn't just about teaching them how to draw, it was about showing them what was possible. One brushstroke at a time, she helped them rebuild confidence, rediscover dreams, and reclaim identity. Every week, those sessions gave Melissa just as much healing as she gave to the girls in her class. The woman who once cried in the dark and questioned her worth now walked with her shoulders back, her voice firm, and her gaze clear. Melissa no longer measured her value by who stayed or who left. She no longer saw herself through John's cruel words or Julia's betrayal. Her story was no longer about them. It was about Emma. It was about... There were still hard days, nights when the silence felt too loud, moments when exhaustion crept in. But they didn't break her. They reminded her of how far she'd come, how strong she'd become. Melissa didn't just survive the betrayal. She transformed because of it. And as Emma giggled from her high chair one quiet afternoon, while Melissa packed another print to ship, she smiled. This was her life. Not perfect, but real, honest, empowered, and entirely her own. Melissa no longer waits for apologies. She doesn't replay old conversations in her head or scroll through photos of what used to be. She doesn't wonder what she did wrong or how things might have turned out differently. That part of her life has closed, quietly and completely. The apologies, when they come, are hollow. John's broken slurs on her doorstep. None of it matters anymore. They speak of regret, of desperation, of mistakes. But Melissa doesn't need their words. She doesn't need their validation. She already knows who she is. Her home is quiet but never empty. There's laughter echoing through the rooms, crayon drawings taped to the fridge, lullabies hummed in the kitchen. Emma toddles around in pajamas, her cheeks round and rosy, her giggle contagious. She is the light Melissa never knew she needed. Every day, Emma reminds her that something beautiful came from the wreckage, that love didn't die, it just changed forms. Melissa lives in the present now. Her days are filled with art, baby giggles, and the peace that comes from knowing you survived. She no longer carries bitterness. There's no revenge fantasy, no desire to see John or Julia suffer. They are simply irrelevant. Metaphorically and literally, Julia, who once passed like everything, now walks alone, shadows under her eyes. John, once so arrogant, now drifts like a ghost, jobless, aimless, forgotten. Melissa doesn't stop. She doesn't look back. She knows who she is. She knows what she's built. And more importantly, she knows what matters. She has no desire to understand why they did what they did. The answer wouldn't change anything. The answer wouldn't take away the nights she cried alone, or the weight she carried during her pregnancy. The answer wouldn't make Emma's birth any less magical, or Melissa's strength any less earned. Emma is her answer. She's the reason Melissa wakes up every morning with a purpose. She's the reason Melissa never feels alone. In Emma's eyes, Melissa sees her own reflection, stronger, wiser, and deeply loved. Every bedtime story, every whispered goodnight, every messy breakfast, is proof that she chose the right path. That walking away, that choosing herself, was not just brave, it was necessary. Melissa no longer waits to be rescued. She doesn't need to be saved. She is her own anchor now, and as Emma grows, she'll learn what resilience looks like. She'll know that her mother faced the storm. The storm rose, not in anger, not in revenge, but in truth. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't payback. It's peace. It's healing. It's watching your life bloom after someone tried to burn it down. Melissa didn't just rebuild. She flourished. And the best part? She did it without ever lifting a finger against the people who betrayed her. She simply walked on and never looked back. He said I was pathetic, but he was the one who crumbled. He called me an embarrassment while I carried our child, alone, in silence and strength. He said I let myself go, but I found myself instead. He thought I'd fall apart without him, but all I did was rise. My name is Melissa Harper. I was left 6 months pregnant, humiliated and told I wasn't enough, but I didn't let those words define me. I let them fuel me. I didn't just survive betrayal, I outgrew it. I built a new life, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. A life centered around truth, healing, and love. A love I give freely to the one person who never broke my heart, my daughter. She is the beginning of everything beautiful in my world. To every woman who has ever been pushed aside, told she wasn't good enough, or left to pick up the pieces on her own, remember, your story isn't over. You're not weak for hurting. You're not broken for grieving. But you are powerful for moving forward. If you see yourself in my story, you're not alone. There's strength in your scars. There's purpose in your pain. And there's a future still waiting to be written. I'm subscribed to Veiled Fury for more stories of women who didn't break, they built. And they never looked back.